So you've created an app and you're ready to launch it on the Play Store. Now what? You've done the hard part, but there are still a few steps you need to take before you can publish. You need a signed release version of your application. You need some assets, namely your app icon, app screenshots, a feature graphic, and you need to create a privacy policy. This might not seem like a lot, but if you've never done this before, it can feel a bit daunting and might even deter you from publishing altogether. Luckily, I just had to do all of this for my app Hydrohomey, which I submitted to the Play Store and hopefully will be live by the time this video drops. Let's go through my process of getting release ready. We'll go through signing and creating a release build for your app, making sure not to leak any key store credentials. Then we'll hop over to Figma to help us get our graphics ready and make them look a little bit better than raw screenshots. We'll go over a few ways we can create a hosted privacy policy URL, and since I'm a bit extra, we'll go over a landing page that I built for Hydrohomey so that if you're so inclined, you can do the same. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get ready to release an Android app. We'll start by getting our signed release build. Now this part already has a lot of documentation, so I'm not going to go over everything, but I do want to share some helpful tips. So let's say you've gone through all the steps of creating a release build. You've chosen if you want an app bundle or an APK, you've created a key store that you're using to sign that build, and you've chosen the release build variant. Once you create that, you now have a binary that you can upload to Google Play Console. After you do that, a few things will be generated for you in your app's build.gradle. Most notably will be this signing config here, which will have all the information about your key store that's needed to sign the app. By default, you'll actually see all your key store properties here in plain text, and that might be okay for you unless you're publishing your app to a public repo in GitHub, in which case you probably don't want to share that information. Google recommends two approaches for this, either prompting for the info or storing that info in environment variables and referencing them here. But I kind of like a third approach, which is to create a .properties file. I called mine keystore.properties, and if we take a look at it, it's just a bunch of key value pairs that I can reference in my build.gradle. Then all you have to do is load that file as a properties object, and you can reference it in your signing config. One final step is to make sure you actually add this to your git ignore so that you don't accidentally check it in or publish it. This next tip is a short but helpful one, which is to set up your debug build type with an application ID suffix. This will allow you to install both the release and the debug versions of your application side by side, rather than having to overwrite one when you're installing the other. It's particularly helpful if you want to install the release version of the app via the Play Store, but you want to keep working on the app using the debug build. All right, with that, we pretty much have everything we need, so let's move on. I'm just going to grab my designer hat here, and let's go build some graphics. Let's quickly go over the required graphics for your Play Store listing. We need a 512 by 512 image version of our app icon. We also need a 1024 by 500 image that we can use as our feature graphic, which will be used in different parts of the Play Store, like search results. And then last, but arguably most important, are the phone screenshots. So you need at least 2 screenshots, and the screenshots need to be a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. Now that we know what we need, let's go over to Figma and create everything for our Play Store submission. One nice part about Figma is the community files. So you can go ahead and search for Google Play Store in the community files and copy over something that is essentially a template of all of the graphics that you'll need. However, I found that this was a bit noisy for me, so I went ahead and did a simpler approach of just creating my own file and creating frames for each image that we need to submit. Starting with the icon, what we need is a 512 by 512 image. So you can see here we have a 512 by 512 frame, and if we wanted to create something like that, we would just go over to this frame tool here, and while holding shift, just drag and create a square, and then just resize it so that's 512. And now we have the frame that we need, and then all we need to do is just pull our icon over and plop it right in the middle. This is assuming that you already have an app icon that you want to use. However, if you don't, have one yet and you want to build your own, I'd highly recommend looking at the content by Michael Flarup. He is a master app icon designer, and even though his content is geared more towards iOS, it translates well for Android, and it really helped me make something that I'm happy with. Next is our feature graphic, and I kept it really simple here. Again, I started by making a frame that fit our content size requirement, which in this case is 1024 by 500. Then I just added some text for the app name and created a background that I thought was fun. You can get creative here, but I wouldn't spend too much time on it. For the screenshots, I made 3 1080 by 1920 frames, which matches the aspect ratio requirement of 9 by 16, and then I put screenshots of Hydro Homie into each of the frames. Then I just scaled down the screenshot, rounded the corners, added a border to make it look like a minimal phone frame, and added some descriptive text for that particular screenshot. To demonstrate how easy it is, I'm just going to replicate that process right now. So if we scroll down here, you can see that I have this frame here, which is the same size, 1080 by 1920, and I'm just going to pull in a screenshot. Let's pull in this one right here. We can see it's a little bit too big, so let me just scale it down a bit to like 640. That feels about right. I'll move it here in the center. Then I'm going to give it some rounded corners, so maybe like 30. And then I'm going to give it a stroke for the border. I'm going to set it to outside, and I'm going to say about a 20 pixel border will look good enough. And let's just change it to like dark grayish. Cool. That looks pretty good. And then the last thing to do is just add some text. Drink water. And I'm just going to move that centered, positioned the way I want it to. And there you go. Pretty professional looking screenshot in my opinion. With that, we've created all the graphics that we need. Now all that's left to do is to export them as images so that we can use them with Google Play Console. In order to do that, I'll just select one of these frames and make sure I'm in the Design tab. Now, my head is probably blocking it for this video, but if you look all the way at the bottom of the Design tab, you'll see this Export menu option right here. So I'm just going to click this Export App Screenshot button and make sure that I selected it as a PNG. And so if I click this, it's going to create that image and allow us to download it so that we can use it with our Play Store listing. Now we've done almost all of the tricky parts of releasing your app to the Play Store except for one, and that's creating our privacy policy. For Hydro Homie, I ended up using a free privacy policy generator tool which spits out a URL that I can use for the privacy policy submission. The tool is called Free Privacy Policy, and all you have to do is specify some information about your app and it'll generate the privacy policy URL for you. Another great option is to use ChatGPT to generate a privacy policy for you. And I think this is the option I'm going to be using going forward. As far as hosting this goes, I would probably just copy this and paste it into a public Notion page, or maybe even just use Google Sites. We're getting into the extra credit section now, and I think building a landing page is a great exercise and will set your app apart. Not only does it help drive traffic to the Play Store, but it looks a lot cooler and makes your app feel more professional. For me, it's been a while since I built a website, so I needed a little help getting started. So I went to the landing page for an app called Up Ahead, which is built by a developer that I really respect, Dan Gauthier. Then I just inspected it to see how it was built. The key takeaway for me was to use Flexbox to lay out a column of sections, and then within each section, potentially use Flexbox as well. Flexbox is a lot like rows and columns in Compose UI. It allows the container to specify the size, spacing, and alignment for the children it contains. CSS Tricks has this amazing guide to Flexbox, and I referred to it many times as I was building the site for Hydro Homie. If we inspect the code for the Hydro Homie landing page, we can see that it is a Flexbox that lays out 3 different components, and each of those components also uses Flexbox to lay out its own children. I'll share the link to the GitHub for the landing page, so feel free to use it as a guide or a template even. All that's left to do is deploy this site, and for that I use Vercel. It was super simple. All I did was create an account on Vercel and point it to GitHub, and it did everything else automatically. Now, anytime I push updates to the GitHub, Vercel will automatically pick up those updates and deploy them for me. And there you have it, a landing page for your app that looks great and shows people where they can download it. Hopefully now you feel a little more confident in your ability to create the necessary components needed to publish your app to the Play Store. The nice thing here is that after you do it once, you have a set of tools and skills that you can reuse when you're building your next project. If you're looking for an app to track your hydration, check out HydroHomie. It's live on the Play Store now, and I think it works great. As always, if you like the video, please subscribe to the channel. That's it from me. See you in the next video.